So this evening, which is the 17th of August, 2022, we're going to begin moving into the 6th point of mind training. The 6th point of mind training has 14 slogans. That's the most so far of any of the points. I'm just going to read through them. The translation that I'm using and the book I'll be using for this part of it is Alan Wallace's book, which is this one here. So the 6th point is entitled The Pledges of Mind Training. Some people translate it the commitments of mind training. Here they come. Always abide by the 3 principles. Shift your priorities, but stay as you are. Do not speak of others' limitations. Do not stand in judgment of others. Abandon all hope of reward. Avoid poisonous food. Do not indulge in self-righteousness. Do not engage in malicious sarcasm. Do not wait in ambush. Do not load the burden of a zoe on an ox. Do not flatter your way to the top. Avoid pretense. Do not bring a god down to the level of a demon. Do not take advantage of another's misfortune. And when the Bodhisattva Moses brought down these sayings from the mountaintop written on 2 stone tablets, the people threw down their idols. No, that's a different story. But it sounds kind of similar in a way. The 14 commandments. Do not, do not, do not. I sometimes get a chuckle out of these because, you know, here our wonderful teachers have brought us to the 4 mind turnings and, of course, the practice of mindfulness itself and calm abiding meditation. And they've turned our attention to bodhicitta, both absolute, that resting in the spaciousness, the perceiving all phenomena as dreamlike, being a child of illusion, and to the wonders of exchange of self and others, the practices of compassion. And then they pointed out that, and here's the really radical part of this whole thing, take adversity as the path. I don't know where else you hear that. You know, really radical, really a profoundly important way of looking at the world differently, with the slogans that went along with that one, of course. Roll all blames into one and be grateful. And the using emptiness as a way of being present to the adversity in a very different way. And then the 4th went into making the practice for your whole life, and the 5 powers, you may recall. And then we just did the assessment section, the 6th one. You know, of the 2 testimonies, rely on the important one. All instructions have one aim. tame ego clinging. Proficiencies means you do it even when distracted. So, so many of the things they say here, don't indulge in self-righteousness, don't engage in malicious sarcasm, don't wait in ambush. If you're practicing these other things that we've already talked about, if you're practicing exchange of self and others, and your compassion is deepening, and you're doing all you can to understand, of course, you wouldn't be doing those things, would you? So I imagine the teacher sitting there saying, dang, we've given them all this stuff, and they're still at it. So maybe we need to be more specific. Let's get more, we'll really hone in on some of the points where people seem to get stuck all the time. So we'll give them all these things. If the general instructions, if these powerful instructions sometimes don't carry them through, we'll give them these other things to really hone their skills and pay attention to. So I appreciate the fact that our teachers from hundreds and hundreds of years ago saw fit to include these kinds of thoughts in what they bring us. And in many of these, there are subtleties that we sometimes don't think about, and they're really worth looking at in those terms. There are even more slogans in the 7th point, but that's for another day. I believe there are more slogans in the last 2 points than in all the other 5 combined. So I want to use Alan Wallace's book here because I find it very clear and makes a lot of sense of these slogans, some of which sound like, what are they talking about? A Zoe, by the way, upon whose burden you would not want to lay upon a ox. There are 2 possibilities there. One is either a female yak, and the other one is a cross between an ox and a yak, just in case you were really wondering what that was. And we'll get to that slogan eventually. So this is what Alan Wallace has to say, and I have no idea how far we'll get this evening. Excuse me 1 second, let me get this thing stopped talking to me. He says this: the 6th point of the 7-point mind training is, as we've noticed, a list of pledges that look like a bunch of thou shalt nots. In Buddhist practice, a pledge is a commitment or a resolve to refrain from certain types of behavior that harm ourselves and others. Almost all the pledges of the 6th point are stated in the negative, making the list tedious from one perspective, but encouraging from another. It can be seen as encouraging in the sense that if we merely refrain from engaging in certain harmful ways of conduct, our bodhicitta will grow effortlessly, like the river that vitalizes itself once pollutants are no longer fed into it. The purpose of this list is to keep us on track. The overall idea of the 6th point is that if you want to cultivate inner well-being throughout states of adversity and felicity, if you want to cultivate ultimate and relative bodhicitta, then save yourself lots of valuable time by stopping certain habitual behaviors that cause suffering. There is a lot to do in transforming all circumstances into the path of spiritual awakening. There is also a lot not to do. The 6th point comprises a list, of behaviors to stop. This is a list of things we do that cause unnecessary trouble and suffering. Mainly, I think, for ourselves, but for others as well. While some suffering is unavoidable, there is also suffering that we can prevent. Recall Shantideva's compassionate observation. Those desiring to escape from suffering hasten right towards suffering. With a very desire for happiness, out of delusion, they destroy their own happiness as if it were an enemy. The sixth point lists behaviors that can be changed by acts of will. An act of will won't be effective for achieving ultimate bodhicitta overnight, any more than you can make flowers grow overnight by sheer willpower. However, just like a garden, bodhicitta will flourish if you attend to it and nurture it. And this can be accomplished with volition, exercised in the right way. If the list arouses resistance, take the pressure off by evaluating its efficacy. Is it beneficial or not? The goal of these pledges is to avoid pitfalls that undermine practice. If you cherish the cultivation of bodhicitta, then this is the list of things to avoid to ensure that your style of life doesn't tear down what you strive to build up through spiritual practice. I'm so sorry. My throat has got a frog in it. I remember the first time I read that list, part of my mind was saying, I'm not waiting in ambush, I'm not maligning with sarcasm. I don't need this. So his suggestion is this going to cause any harm? Well, no, it's not. And there may well be some things that we can see certain aspects in ourselves, perhaps only faintly at times, perhaps more full-blown at times too, if we really take a moment and look. So the first of these slogans is actually not a thou shalt not. It says, always abide by three principles. Here's another one of those slogans that has all these parts to it, and all three this, five that, and so on. This one has three principles. And sometimes we read you the way it's written. In The Great Path of Awakening, the yellow book, Jamgon Control's book. The first one, the way Alan Wallace says it is, do not contravene your commitments to training the mind. And Jamgon Control says, not to break the promises you've made in mind training. Not to be tarnished by any fault or failing in any vow you have taken, including even the most minor precepts of individual liberation. The second one, according to Wallace's translation, do not have a sense of bravado in mind training. And Jamgon Control says, not to act scandalously. In the Tibetan culture in which this arose and was put in this particular form, getting puffed up about your progress in the mind trainings was to act scandalously. Kind of a different scandal than the kind of thing we normally think of, but that was how it was. And the third one, according to Alan Wallace, is do not have an uneven mind training, which Jamgon Control says, avoid being one-sided. So that's the first of these slogans. And this one is, I think, worth spending a little bit of time on. We won't spend a whole bunch of time on each one of these slogans, but there are some that I think that are really kind of worth delving into a little bit. So, do not contravene your commitments to mind training. This means do not be dismissive of vows. Paradoxically, when some people begin to feel progress in meditation, they feel that their spiritual realization overrides the importance of ethics. When you begin to experience the spacious quality of awareness, you may begin to think that you are so advanced on the path that you are above the ethical rules that apply to ordinary people. And unfortunately, we've seen that in some of the truly scandalous behavior of some Buddhist teachers, who would say, and whose adherents sometimes said, anything this person does because they're awake or liberated is done for the purpose of the Dharma. And, whole traditions have come tumbling down around the ears of people who have perceived themselves in this way. Shogun Trungpa comes to mind. Baker Roshi comes to mind. There's another Zen one. The shoes outside the door, is that Baker Roshi or somebody else? Anyway, we're aware that there are many. And then, of course, there's the Catholic Church and the Baptist Church. It goes on and on. People start to think they're above these things. Padmasambhava, who is sort of a Buddha of the Tibetan tradition, in a way, the very famous saying of his, he commented in this regard that even though his view was as vast as space, and we've felt that, touched that just a bit in our meditation tonight, his conduct was as fine as grains of barley flour. There is no point so advanced that we can be dismissive of ethics. I think I just want to say one more thing about this aspect of it. Do not contravene your commitments to training the mind, or to the Lojong trainings, if you want to put it that way. So the question then arises, what commitment have we made to the mind trainings? And I think that's worth reflecting on. In fact, right now, just for a moment, letting your eyes close for a moment, you can ask, have I made a commitment to practice these mind trainings? More than simply learning about them, more than practicing with them as we go through them, but really committing to taking adversity as the path, really committing to cultivating absolute bodhicitta, relative bodhicitta, is the most important thing. And all the other trainings, do I have a commitment to that? One perhaps that would take me beyond the time that we as a group spend with them. And if your answer is, well, not really, then the next question would be, do I want to do that? Do I really want to, within myself, say, yes, this is really important and valuable? And I want to commit to it so that I am increasingly in the world in the way I want to be. Continuing to train the mind to be present, to ask, how do I want to be in this moment, with wanting to be of benefit. And there's something Jemgen Control said at the end of the third point, in summary thing. In summary, maintain the motivation to help others, whatever you are doing, eating, sleeping, walking, or sitting. As soon as you encounter a situation, good or bad, work at this practice of mind training. Is that something that I can sign on to? And if it is, you might want to consider, if you haven't already, really making a clear commitment within your own mind to follow up on that, to follow that path. There actually are, there are bodhisattva vows. There's the Tibetan tradition of a bodhisattva vow and Zen traditions of bodhisattva vows, where we say, just like the Buddhas of the past who brought forth the awakened mind. Likewise, I, for the sake of beings, will bring to birth the awakened mind, and step by step in the precepts of the bodhisattvas will abide and train. That's part of one of the bodhisattva vows. Sounds very Buddhist, I know. But if you remove that from it, it's saying, I want to train my mind to be present in a positive way in the world, clearly and consciously. And as I know, to some degree, all the people that are here this evening, I'm aware that everyone here has made that commitment in some form, in some way, and is in fact living a conscious life with intention. And I guess this is an invitation to look at these practices as a way of doing it that can be very, very valuable to continue with as a practice without seeing a stopping point. At some point, our practice here will end as a group. We'll do something else, but we don't have to stop these practices. So I will stop there and bow to you all and turn off the recording.